"You're not sitting at the head table, Mom. We only have room for immediate family." My son said it while adjusting his cufflinks, not looking at me, just adjusting his cufflinks like he was commenting on the weather in Sudbury. I had to ask him to repeat himself. "The head table," he said again, this time with that patient, careful tone people use when they believe they're explaining something obvious to someone slow. "It's just the two of us, Danielle's parents, and the wedding party. You understand." I understood. I had understood for years. I just hadn't been willing to say it out loud until that moment. "Hello, everyone. I'm Megan." And when I first read this moment shared by a woman named Dorothy, something in my chest went very still. There's a particular kind of hurt that doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, in a sentence that sounds almost reasonable. Tell me honestly, how many of you have been made to feel like a guest in your own family? I am 68 years old. I grew up in Timmins, raised 2 children mostly on my own after my husband passed in 2003, and I have never once considered myself a fragile woman. I negotiated my way through a 20-year career in municipal planning when there were very few women at those tables. I once drove 4 hours through a February blizzard on the 400 just to bring my son a birthday cake when he was in his first year at Laurentian. I do not cry easily. But standing in the lobby of the Fairmont in downtown Ottawa, 2 days before my son's wedding, I felt something go thin inside me. Like ice on the river in early April. Still there, still holding, but not for much longer. My son's name is Kevin. He is 41 years old, works in commercial real estate in Ottawa, and has recently developed the habit of speaking to me in a tone I can only describe as managerial. He didn't always do this. When he was younger, he used to call me every Sunday from wherever he was living just to talk. Nothing important, just the particular warmth of a son who wanted to tell his mother about his week. That stopped gradually after he married Danielle. Danielle is not a cruel woman. I want to be clear about that. She's organized, ambitious, and very good at creating the impression that everything in her life is carefully curated. Her Pinterest boards are immaculate. Her holiday cards arrive in embossed envelopes. She refers to our family gatherings as events and sends agendas in advance. She's the kind of person who makes you feel slightly underdressed even when you've made an effort. She had been planning this wedding for 14 months. I had been paying for it for 11 of them. Not all of it, of course. Kevin had contributed, but the catering deposit, $14,000 to a firm in Gatineau, the venue rental at the Fairmont, which I had transferred to their joint account in 2 installments. The flowers, ordered from a boutique in Westboro that Danielle had insisted on because the owner had done some minor celebrity's wedding in Toronto. Small favors, Kevin had said each time. "Just a little help, Mom. You know how things add up." I did know. I had always known. The morning he told me about the seating arrangement, I had just come downstairs from my hotel room. I was wearing my good gray blazer, the one I bought at Holt Renfrew 2 winters ago, and I was carrying the small gift I had wrapped for Danielle's mother, whom I was meeting for the first time that day. I felt, I will admit, something close to hopeful. Kevin was standing near the concierge desk. He looked polished. He always looked polished now. His tie was the same shade of dusty blue as the wedding color scheme, which Danielle had sent me in a PDF document along with suggested outfit guidelines for family members. Suggested. The word had done a great deal of quiet work in that sentence. "We wanted to keep the head table intimate," Kevin said. "You get it." I get it. I looked at him for a moment. The lobby smelled faintly of cedar and something floral. A bellhop moved past us pulling a cart of luggage. Somewhere near the entrance, a child laughed, high and clear. "Who did you put me with?" I asked. "Table 7, he said. "It's a really nice table, Mom, near the windows." "Table 7, near the windows," as though the view were compensation. I smiled at my son in a way I hoped looked neutral and told him I was going to get some coffee. He nodded, already reaching for his phone. Already elsewhere, I walked to the small cafe off the lobby and sat down with an Americano I didn't drink. I sat there for perhaps 10 minutes looking out at the street where taxis and ride-shares moved in their quiet Ottawa morning rhythm. A woman walked past with a dog wearing a plaid coat. A man in a Canada Post jacket crossed against the light. I thought about the $14,000. I thought about the conversation 6 months ago when Kevin had called me, very casually, to mention that the catering company required a non-refundable deposit and that they were in a bit of a tight spot. Just timing, he'd said. Danielle's parents were helping with other things. It would all balance out. I had opened my online banking through TD before we even finished the call. I thought about the second installment for the venue, $22,000. Kevin had framed it as a loan, technically. He had even mentioned paying it back, the way people mention things they have no real intention of doing. I had not pushed. I never pushed. Family helps family. I opened my phone and looked at the total I had transferred to their joint account over the past 11 months. The number was not small. I finished my coffee and went back upstairs. Standing at the window of my hotel room, looking out over the Rio Canal, I did something I had been avoiding for a very long time. I did the arithmetic on what my generosity had actually purchased. A head table I was not invited to sit at, a seating chart that placed me near the windows with what I could only assume were the out-of-town relatives and the childhood friends Kevin had mostly lost touch with. A weekend in a hotel I had, in some indirect but undeniable way, helped to pay for. And a son who had stopped looking me in the eye when he told me these things. I am not a woman who makes decisions quickly. I spent 20 years in municipal planning, which means I understand that the difference between a good decision and a disaster is usually the time you take to think clearly before you act. So I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and I thought for a long time. The wedding was in 2 days. The rehearsal dinner was tomorrow evening. I had a dress hanging in the closet, deep burgundy, which I had bought specifically because the PDF had suggested jewel tones for family. I had earrings. I had a speech prepared, which Kevin had not actually asked me to give, but which I had written anyway because I am his mother, and I thought someone should say something kind. I thought about what it would mean to sit at table 7, to smile through dinner while Kevin and Danielle presided over the head table with her parents who had, as far as I could tell, contributed a set of dishes and the rehearsal dinner venue which Danielle's father had secured through some golf connection. To cut my chicken and make pleasant conversation with people I didn't know, while the man I raised sat 30 feet away and felt entirely comfortable with this arrangement. And then I thought about something else. The catering deposit. My name was still on the original contract. When Kevin had asked me to make the transfer, I had done it directly. The payment confirmation had come to my email, $14,000, non-refundable, to a catering company in Gatineau, non-refundable to the client, not necessarily to the original cardholder. I picked up my phone and called the catering company. The woman who answered was named Sylvie. She was professional, helpful, and slightly puzzled when I explained that I was the original cardholder on the deposit and that I had some concerns about the authorization going forward. She asked me to hold. Then she asked me to confirm my information. Then she told me, carefully, that the deposit was held in the name of the account, the business account, but that the authorization for the remaining balance, the balance due 48 hours before the event, had not yet been processed. The remaining balance, I said calmly, won't be coming from me. There was a pause. I see, said Sylvie. I'd like to note that for the file, I said. The remaining authorization should be arranged by the couple directly. Another pause, shorter this time. Of course, she said. I'll make note of that. I thanked her and hung up. Then I opened my banking app and looked at the venue payment. The Fairmont contract had been arranged through Kevin and Danielle's joint account. I had transferred the money to them, not directly to the hotel. That one was more complicated. But the transfer itself, the one I had made in 2 installments, had come with a note. I had written it myself, for wedding venue. Loan, to be repaid. It had been documented, quietly, out of habit, because 20 years in municipal planning teaches you to document everything. I didn't do anything about the venue that afternoon. I went downstairs, met Danielle's mother for coffee, found her to be a perfectly pleasant woman from Mississauga who collected vintage brooches and had strong opinions about the Raptors, and spent a genuinely nice 90 minutes talking about things that had nothing to do with seating charts. That evening, Kevin texted to confirm the rehearsal dinner start time. I confirmed. I smiled at my phone. I went to bed at 9:30. The rehearsal dinner was at a private room in a restaurant in the Byward Market. Danielle's father had organized it, the Golf Connection. It was a perfectly nice restaurant. The food was good. I sat beside a cousin of Danielle's from Hamilton who had very strong opinions about the housing market and spent most of dinner explaining why he had pivoted from tech into real estate, which he seemed to find interesting and I found exhausting. Kevin gave a short speech. He thanked Danielle's parents by name. He thanked the wedding party. He made a joke about his fantasy hockey team that got a big laugh from Ethan and a couple of the groomsmen. At the end, almost as an addition, he said, "And of course thanks to Mom for everything." Everything. Such a small word for such a large amount of money. I raised my glass and smiled. On the drive back to the Fairmont, sitting in the back of a rideshare with the Ottawa night moving past the windows, I made my decision, not out of anger. I want to be clear about that. I had moved past anger somewhere around the second installment. What I felt now was something older and quieter. It had the shape of clarity. The next morning, I called Kevin at 9 a.m. He answered on the third ring, slightly distracted, probably going over the day's logistics. The wedding was at 4. He had a lot to manage. "Good morning," I said. "I need to tell you something before tonight." "Mom, can it wait? We're kind of in the middle of—" "No," I said. "It can't." He went quiet. I think the word surprised him. I don't use it often. "I called Sylvie at the catering company yesterday," I said. "The remaining balance for the catering, the amount to tomorrow, won't be coming from my account. I wanted you to know with enough time to make other arrangements." The silence that followed lasted several seconds. "What?" Kevin said. "The deposit I made 11 months ago stands. That money is gone and I'm not asking for it back, but the remaining balance is yours to arrange." "Mom." His voice had shifted. "What are you doing?" "I'm telling you clearly," I said, "so you have time to sort it out. You can just—" He stopped. Started again. "The wedding is today." "Yes," I said, "and Sylvia at the catering company knows to expect payment from you directly." I'd call her before noon. I could hear him breathing. "Is this about the seating?" he said finally. I considered that question. Then I answered it honestly. "No," I said, "it's about 11 months. I heard him exhale. Then, in a lower voice, "Danielle is going to lose her mind." "That's between the two of you," I said. "I love you. Call Sylvie." And I hung up. My phone began ringing before I had set it back on the nightstand. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. I let that one go too. A text came through from Kevin. "Mom, call me back right now." Then another. "This isn't funny." Then one from Danielle, which was longer and which I read once and did not respond to. I ordered room service, eggs Benedict, which I had been wanting since I arrived and kept deciding was too indulgent. I ate them by the window, watching the canal. A family of geese was making their way along the bank. The morning was clear, that particular blue sky October clarity that Ontario does better than anywhere. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. I answered. "Dorothy?" A man's voice, careful, formal. "Speaking," I said, and then caught myself. Old habit. Yes, this is she. It's Danielle's father, Robert. I set down my fork. "Robert," I said pleasantly, "good morning." "I'm going to skip the pleasantries," he said, "because I understand we have a bit of a situation. That's one way to describe it." He exhaled through his nose. I could picture him, the kind of man who plays golf twice a week and considers himself a good negotiator. "Kevin tells me there's an issue with the catering deposit. Or the remainder, rather." "The remaining balance," I said. "Yes, Kevin and Danielle will need to arrange that themselves." "The wedding is in 6 hours. I'm aware." A pause. "Dorothy." His tone had softened into something meant to sound reasonable. "Whatever happened between you and Kevin, and I don't know the details. Today is not the day." I looked out at the canal. The geese had moved further along the bank. A cyclist in full gear was crossing the bridge. "Robert," I said, "how much did you and your wife contribute to this wedding?" A shorter pause this time. "That's not really relevant. The set of Lennox dishes," I said, "and the rehearsal dinner, which I'm guessing the restaurant gave you a discount on, given the connection." Silence. "I'm not asking you to do math out loud," I said. "I'm just making a point." He cleared his throat. "Kevin's mother, regardless of—" "Dorothy," I said. "You can call me Dorothy." "Dorothy." He tried again, more carefully this time. "Is there anything that would change your position on this?" I thought about table 7, near the windows. "No," I said. He hung up, not rudely, but with the decisiveness of a man who had expected a different answer and didn't have a second plan. I finished my eggs. 40 minutes later, Kevin knocked on my hotel room door. I had known he would come in person eventually. It's what I would have done in his position. Texts can be ignored. A mother standing 3 floors above you is harder to avoid. I opened the door. He looked the way people look when they've been managing a crisis since 9 in the morning, slightly undone around the edges, the polished quality of the night before worn thin. His tie was loosened. He was holding his phone like it might say something useful if he kept gripping it. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped back and let him in. He sat on the edge of the chair near the window. I sat on the bed. Between us, the remains of my room service tray and the canal outside, and 11 months of things we hadn't said to each other. "The caterer needs the remaining balance by 2 o'clock, he said, "or they won't set up." "Then I'd call them before noon," I said, as I mentioned. He looked at me. Really looked at me. Perhaps for the first time in a while. "Mom, what is this actually about?" I had thought about how to answer that question since 9 a.m. I had a long answer and a short answer. I gave him the short one first. "You put me at table 7. He had the grace to look slightly ashamed. "It's not. The head table is small. It's just tradition." "Kevin," I said gently, "I've been paying for this wedding for 11 months. He didn't answer immediately. "I know," he said finally. "The venue, the catering deposit, the flowers which Danielle chose and which I paid for without being asked, all of it was treated as given, as something that simply appeared." He rubbed the back of his neck. "We're going to pay you back." "I know you believe that." He looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" I chose my next words carefully. "It means that I have been telling myself the same thing for a long time, that things would balance out, that family helps family." I paused. "But family, Kevin, is not supposed to be one person's credit card." He was quiet for a long moment. Outside, I could hear the elevator down the hall, and somewhere on the street below, a truck reversing. "You're punishing us," he said. "No," I said, "I'm stopping." He shook his head slowly. "The wedding is in 5 hours. I know. And you have time to sort out the catering if you call before noon. The venue is paid. The flowers are paid. The photographer. Did I pay for the photographer?" A small, uncomfortable pause. "Danielle's aunt is doing it," he said quietly. "She's a hobbyist." "Good," I said. "Then the pictures are handled." Kevin looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on him since he was very young. Not angry. Something younger than anger. Something closer to confusion, and beneath the confusion, the beginning of something else. "Why didn't you say something before?" he asked. "Because you didn't ask," I said simply. He didn't have an answer for that. We sat in silence for a moment. The canal shimmered outside the window. October light on water has a particular quality in Ottawa. Gold and sideways and almost too clear. "I need to know," Kevin said slowly, "if you're coming tonight." I had been thinking about that all morning. "That depends," I said. "On what? On whether you'd like me there?" He blinked. "You're my mother." "Yes," I said. "I am. And I would like to be treated like one." A long pause followed. The longest of the morning. Then Kevin did something I hadn't expected. He put his face in his hands, not dramatically, just quietly, the way someone does when they've run out of other options. When he looked up again, his eyes were red at the edges. "I know I've let things slide," he said, "with you." I didn't say anything. Sometimes saying nothing is the most honest response. "Danielle runs a lot of things," he continued, "the planning, the decisions, and I let her because it's easier, but I think somewhere along the way I stopped." He stopped. "Started again." "I stopped thinking about how it looked from where you were standing." That sentence stayed in the room for a moment. "Your friend Lucas from the transcript." He caught himself. "Sorry. I mean, I've been thinking about what I'd want someone to say to me if I were you." I almost smiled at that. "Apologies are useful," I said, "when they come with changes." He nodded slowly. "I know." "The seating chart," I said. He pulled out his phone. I watched him send a message. A few seconds later, it buzzed with a reply. He looked up. "There's a seat at the head table," he said, "between me and Danielle's mother, if you want it." I thought about that. "I'll sit near the windows," I said. He looked surprised. Table 7 is fine, I said. What I wanted was for you to offer. He stared at me for a moment, and then, quietly, he laughed. A real one. The kind I hadn't heard from him in some time. You're difficult, he said. I'm your mother, I said. It's my job. He stood up, straightened his tie. He looked a little less undone than he had when he'd arrived. He leaned down and hugged me, which he hadn't done without prompting in several years. I let him. At the door he paused. I'll call the caterer, he said. Before noon, I said. Before noon, he agreed. After he left, I stood at the window for a long time. The geese were back on the canal, or different geese, moving in the same unhurried way. A tour boat drifted past, almost empty. A guide speaking into a microphone to an audience of 3. I thought about what it did cost me to say the things I said that morning. Not the $14,000, the other cost. The years of letting things slide because it was easier, because I told myself that keeping the peace was the same as keeping the family. It wasn't. I took my dress out of the closet, deep burgundy, jewel tones as suggested. I laid it on the bed and looked at it for a moment. Then I picked up my phone and called my daughter, who lives in Halifax and had not been able to come to the wedding. We talked for 45 minutes about nothing important. Her job, the weather there, the fact that her cat had learned to open the kitchen cupboards. It was the best conversation I'd had all week. At the reception that evening, I sat at table 7, near the windows. The cousins from Hamilton were perfectly nice. The food was good. The catering company had set up beautifully, right on schedule, after Kevin had called Sylvie before noon. At one point during the speeches, Kevin looked across the room at me. Just for a moment, he raised his glass slightly. I raised mine back. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. People often talk about self-respect, like it's something you find, like it's been sitting in a drawer somewhere, waiting. But I think, most of the time, it's something you choose, quietly, without announcement. Usually in a hotel room with room service getting cold, and a phone full of missed calls, and a canal shining outside the window. What would you have done? Tell me in the comments. And if stories like this speak to you, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll be back soon. I've been thinking about that morning in the hotel room a lot lately. The eggs, Benedict going cold, the canal outside, the phone full of messages I didn't answer. People ask me sometimes whether I regretted, whether I think I was too hard on Kevin, too calculated, too cold. And I understand why they ask. On the surface, it must look like a mother who chose a point over her son's wedding day, like pride dressed up as principal. But here's what I've come to understand. Slowly, over the months since Ottawa, what we allow to continue, continues. That's not a philosophy I read somewhere. It's just what I've watched happen in my own life, and in the lives of women I know. When I kept transferring money without saying a word, I wasn't being generous. I was teaching Kevin that the money would always be there, that the discomfort of asking was the only cost, and that the asking itself could be softened into something barely resembling a request at all. I taught him, without meaning to, that my feelings were secondary to the smooth running of his arrangements. The seating chart was just the moment I finally saw it clearly. There's something about being placed at table 7 near the windows, as though the view were a consolation prize, that cuts through the stories you've been telling yourself. All those years of family helps family, all those wire transfers, those quiet agreements, that particular exhaustion of being useful without being valued. It cuts through all of it and leaves something very simple behind. Either this changes or it doesn't. And if it doesn't change, it's because I didn't make it change. That's the part nobody warns you about. The part where you realize that the discomfort you've been trying to spare everyone else has been quietly living inside you the whole time, taking up space that belonged to your own dignity. I'm not proud of every moment of that day. I don't think Kevin is either. But I am proud of the phone call I made to Sylvie. Not because it was dramatic, it wasn't. It was the least dramatic thing I did all weekend. I simply told the truth about what I would and wouldn't be doing going forward. Calmly, clearly, without raising my voice or sending 3 paragraphs of explanation. Just, this won't be coming from me. You'll want to speak to them directly. That kind of clarity takes years to build. It doesn't arrive because you decided one morning to be brave. It arrives because you've spent long enough watching what happens when you aren't. Kevin is different with me now. Not transformed, I'm not interested in fairy tales, but different. He calls on Sundays again, sometimes. He asked me last month what I thought about something, an actual decision, and waited for my answer before speaking. Small things. But small things, chosen repeatedly, are what relationships are actually made of. What I want to say to anyone who recognizes something of their own life in Dorothy's story is this: intelligence isn't only about knowing things. It's about being honest with yourself about what you've been letting happen and why. Courage isn't only about grand gestures. Sometimes it's a phone call before noon, and the most ethical thing you can do in a relationship isn't always to keep the peace. Sometimes it's to tell the truth about where you actually stand, even when the timing is inconvenient, even when it costs something, even when the other person is going to be upset about it. What would you have done in her place? I'd genuinely like to know. And if this story stayed with you, please like the video and subscribe to Megan's Stories. I'll be back soon.